This is Judge Joe Brown, and we're listening to We All Be News, news-free Dixie for the 21st century.
Hello, everybody out there in the internet blogosphere. This is your host, your man with the most, R2C2H2, the artivist. Artivist presents We All Be Radio, and today's theme, as well as the month theme, is We Are the Renaissance. And to continue this special thing, we have a special guest, Brother Michael Holman. This was a pre-interview, unfortunately, but it was a very entertaining one nonetheless. And I'm sure that whoever listens to this wonderful interview will be entertained as well as informed, which equals edutain or edutainment. And Brother Michael Holman, if you're not aware, is one of our most popular and most requested guests on this wonderful show. So much so that we decided to do a spin-off called Holman Unleashed. Brother Michael Holman is a Renaissance artist. He's the epitome of what a Renaissance artist is and what a Renaissance artist does. He was one of the best friends of the legendary visual artist Jean-Michel Basquiat. They started the music band Grey, as in Grey's Anatomy, not the TV show, but as in the anatomy book. It is very popular among medical students and people in the medical profession. And this brother went on to write the screenplay for Jean-Michel Basquiat's biopic called Jean-Michel Basquiat, which was directed by another visual artist, Julian Schnabel. He wrote the screenplay for that, and he also directed music videos. Was one of the first people to promote Dougie Fresh, and he's a good friend of Fab Five Freddy, who was the first host of Yo MTV Raps. And speaking of rap, he will be discussing today the formation of the first hip-hop TV show, Graffiti Rock. That's his magnum opus. It was Brother Michael Holman before it was MTV or before BET caught on that actually put hip-hop on the TV map. So he's going to be telling us that wonderful tale about the formation of Graffiti Rock, what motivated him to create this TV show, which only aired one episode, and he'll get into the details of that, but which also featured a young Debbie Mazar, who will eventually sing with Madonna and become a star in her own right. She was Ray Liotta's girlfriend in Goodfellas, as well as she was like one of the big stars on the hit HBO series Entourage. And Vincent Gallo, the well-known independent filmmaker and actor, who's also good friends with Jean-Michel Basquiat. And before we get into that, let me just add that please, everybody, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, every Saturday, please check out the Empowerment Hour with Brother Kermit Edie, the godfather of Black economics, empowering black people through economics. The Empowerment Hour with Brother Kermit Edie airs every Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern. This guy has some wonderful guests on. He's a great friend of the We All Be Radio organization, and we just want to support this brother, as well as his staff and future and fellow visionaries, Brother Jason and Brother Larry Barton. Please check them out at www.blogtalkradio.com/ED Associates. Once again, that's www.blogtalkradio.com/ED Associates. That's EAD as in dog, Y as in yogurt, ASSOCIATES, ED Associates. And without further ado, we'd like to bring y'all the one, the only, the original Brother Michael Holman in his self-titled special We All Be Radio segment. And all right, welcome to this week's special edition of We All Be Radio. This special edition is also known as Holman Unleashed, with famous Renaissance man extraordinaire, Mr. Michael Holman. Are you on the air, Mr. Michael Holman?
I am here. How are you? How's everybody out there?
I think everybody's doing fine and well, whoever's listening to this broadcast. And we'd just like to touch base with you on a couple of things. Number one, you just had a recent lawsuit, or you was filed a lawsuit against somebody who was using some of your footage illegally and it ended up becoming a gold mine for you without even going to court. Can you please tell us about that?
Well, real quickly, my boy Ralph McDaniels, who's like a real sweetheart, a real great guy, who's been a hip-hop head and promoting hip-hop videos for more than 20 years now, one of his shows is on NYC TV and one of his shows called The Bridge. It shows old school hip hop video, and unbeknownst to him, one of his editors used some of my hip hop footage that I normally license for money in the show. You see it on the monitor as every time he introduces a new video, and it's also in the opening credits and the closing credits. So, I went after NYC TV. I said, listen, you can't use my footage without my permission, and you've got to pay me now. And when I hit them with the price, they were sort of gagging because, it's a small network, and they play mainly reality-based TV shows, travel shows, cooking shows, mostly about New York, though. Mm-hmm. And I said to them, well, I'm negotiable. Why don't you give me a show? And they were like, It turned out they were already looking for programming. And I hit them with an idea of a show that's episodic in nature. So I would be telling stories, writing scripts and telling stories, develop, with characters, that reappearing characters for each episode, shot on film, which is unusual because all the other shows are shot on video. And so I've already gone to Kodak, who I know some of the executives there from Kodak, and they're really excited about it because I want the show to actually promote film. Because so much of TV, Ron, is video oriented because it's so cheap and it makes so much money for the networks and for the broadcasters, and so much we've turned away from film. When as you see more and more reality shows and more like I said, reality shows, reality show programming. And I want to get back to film. I love the way film looks. I've been thinking like a show, all black and white film. It'd be like the old it would be like the old Twilight Zone from the 60s. And so Kodak is really supportive, and they want to get involved and with film and production packages, etc. But I still need more corporate support to make this dream a reality. And so I'm throwing a shout out there to anyone listening who might know of somebody or might be in a position to help or might want to be involved with this project for corporate sponsorship, in which they can also help get the show on the air. The show is capable of running commercials, so if a corporation gets involved, they can run commercials. Right. It's not like PBS where you can't run commercials. There will be commercials involved. So this is just a shout out for anybody out there. And okay, so let me tell you a little bit more about the show real quickly so people can get excited. Anybody out there who understands the filmmaking of French New Wave, like artists like Jean-Luc Godard, whose films like Breathless and Band of Outsiders and Alphaville, these are some of the really cutting-edge art film type films, or even the films of David Lynch, who made Eraserhead and Blue Velvet, American artistic filmmakers. I'd like to make films, or Jim Jarmusch. I'd like to make short episodic shows, 22 minutes, 24 minutes, or 30-minute film, 30-minute show, because you have commercials playing, of course, that emulate and that are in the style of these very artistic filmmakers. They may even pay homage to these filmmakers. For example, I'll give you an idea. For example, there might be an episode in which the protagonist, who would be someone very much based on me, whose dream is to make a film in Super 8, right? And you see this character going through all the machinations of trying to get this dream realized, and that's what that whole episode's about. And in order to push the point further, the episode is actually, that one episode will be shot in Super 8. Mm-hmm. So those are the levels of thinking, those are the levels of creativity that I'm talking about. Now, don't forget, everybody out there, I wrote the screenplay to the film Basquiat by Julian Schnabel, direction, a Miramax film, so I'm already in that world of like cutting-edge film, but we would take it even further than that. So if anybody out there, now we want to get back to what Ron wants to talk about, but if anybody out there is interested in what I'm talking about and has connections to corporate sponsors, or just wants to help me get this TV show going, and right now, working title of the TV show is called Downtown. Mm-hmm. So if anybody out there has any connections and wants to help me make this a reality, contact me at michaelholman101@hotmail.com. That's MichaelHolman101@hotmail.com. michaelholman101@hotmail.com. Thanks, Ron, for letting me do that shout-out.
Oh, no problem, because also, I mean, it kind of comes full circle what I want to discuss today, which is your adventures into television for, I guess, the first time with your baby, your magnum opus, Graffiti Rock. So you please tell us a little bit about that, because I think it's very interesting, because it's kind of like it's foreshadowing the coming of BET or VH1's and MTV's foray into the hip-hop culture.
Well, and thank you for that. Number one, everything has its roots. Everything has its inspirations. Has something that it was inspired by and where it comes from. Everything has a grandfather and a godfather. I mean, James Brown was the godfather of hip-hop. And Graffiti Rock had its inspirations and had its first attempts. In other words, before I ever tried to make Graffiti Rock, I was already making hip-hop programming for cable TV in New York. Talk about coming full circle with this idea of downtown for cable TV in New York, NYC TV. Back in the late 70s and early 80s, New York was the first city in America, as far as I know, and I was told this by executives at NYC TV. New York City was the first city in America to have cable TV, to have this cable TV where beyond the obvious CBS, NBC, ABC stuff, you had this cable TV that was more local based, that you could have all these like it was public access television, and you had these channels 27, 28, 70 something. There was alphabet channels like channel J and K and whatever, and people like myself, people who had no money, who had no connections, no commercial backing or corporate backing, could go to MNN, Manhattan Neighborhood Network, and propose to them an idea for a show and give them an idea about their background in production, and MNN would give you a show. And what you would do is you'd go out and shoot and edit and put together a show for X amount of period of time, whatever it was that they were asking for, either half an hour or an hour, and then you would supply them each week with a tape, usually a 3/4-inch tape, which now today is like, is some kind of weird antiquated relic. Nobody even uses 3/4-inch anymore, but I'm looking up in my shelf right now in my bedroom looking at 50 different 3/4-inch tapes. But anyway, you would deliver these tapes to MNN, and each week at the allotted time, they would air your show over an area that stretched from above 14th Street in Manhattan all the way up to 90-something or 120-something, I forget. And that was it. That was the only place that your show would air. Those were the only people who had cable, and usually cable was for better reception, would have all these extra stations, and they could watch your show, and I don't know how many, probably was a couple of million people could actually see your show. And back in the early 80s, I was the only person to do this. I was the first person to do this. I decided, this hip-hop thing is going to be a big thing. It's going to blow up. I want to do hip-hop television programming. Nobody was doing that anywhere in the world. So first thing I did is I had this show called The J Show. And I thought it's going to be kind of like a Sesame Street show. Like everything on it's going to be about the letter J. Okay? So on the show, but of course they're going to be hip downtown, hip stuff and uptown stuff. So on the show I did an interview of Jean-Michel Basquiat and showed his paintings. I went on the J train and shot all the graffiti and everything on the J train. Somebody's calling me on my cell phone. I'm going to ignore it. And I did a whole thing on Jazzy J. and I went to the underground where Jazzy was playing, where Jazzy was spinning, and filmed him as he was like DJing and interviewed him, etc. So that was my first foray into actually putting hip-hop on the air. Then later on, I did another show called On Beat TV. And on On Beat TV, my boy and partner in my band, Gray, was Jean-Michel Basquiat, who is now into hip-hop DJing, DJ High Priest, Nick Taylor, who was the first white DJ, the first white hip-hop DJ. He was in the band with Jean-Michel Basquiat and I. And Nick Taylor did the music to On Beat TV, which is really cool, like really raw, ignorant beat with like this odd sound. One of these days we're going to do a radio show, Ron, which we're going to play all this music. And we're going to we're going to organize it in advance so that you can play all these different things as I talk about it. And on Beat TV, I did a bunch of interviews as well with hip-hop, future hip-hop artists and friends of mine who were like DJs and B-boys and whatever. But the real first hip-hop, truly hip-hop show that I did for cable TV, again, only for New York City, only aired in New York City, was called TV New York. TV New York I shot at SVA, and this is really historic because at SVA, School of Visual Arts, a friend of mine was the head of production there, and she snuck us in after hours when none of the school officials were there. And I put on we lit it and we shot this like TV show in which we got a bunch of neighborhood kids with their Kangol and girls and guys, and they're dancing to all this music. And there's Grand Mixer DST as the DJ of this party, and Futura is tagging all over the wall on this photo paper that we put up. So we got Futura tagging up. I've got Grand Mixer DST. Now, if anybody out there doesn't know Grand Mixer DST is, Grand Mixer DST is the DJ who's on Herbie Hancock's Rocket song. So we all know that, right? Dun 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 dun. That was the Grand Mixer DST with his crew of rappers. I had on that show as well Fab Five Freddy rapping. I had my boy DJ High Priest, who I told you was first white hip-hop DJ, one of the first hip-hop DJs, frankly. I had, and now this is historic, I had first human beatbox, the Dougie Fresh. Filmed him, and I was actually, nobody knew who Dougie Fresh was, and I was actually and because of that, I continued to promote Dougie Fresh, and was one of the first promoters of Dougie Fresh, helped get his career going, and as some people out there know, I've directed his first music video for All the Way to Heaven. Now, so at this SVA experience, where I was shooting TV New York, is truly the first hip-hop, and then, of course, there's dancers and B-boys. It's truly the first hip-hop show. So now I've got this, and I think either this guy saw it and contacted me, but it was the manager of the New Edition. Now, everyone knows the New Edition. Anybody knows the New Edition knows that they came out of Boston. And this cat was this young black, I think he was like Harvard educated, real smooth, real smart, real together brother, who was the manager of New Edition. And he approached me about taking my show to the next step. And I'm like, bet, And he's in bed with these other investors who are from Payne Weber. These are executives of Payne Weber, this big corporate investment firm. People out there who may remember their commercial, when Payne Weber talks, people listen.
Right.
So I met these other guys, Steve Mamishian and this other cat who I can't remember his name now. And we sat down, and this is like in the 80s, before the early 80s, while Reagan is president, Ronald Reagan's president, but before Reagan did something that one of the many things that I hate this guy for. People talk about Ronald Reagan like he was some great president. Man, the guy was a complete loser. He was as bad. He wasn't quite as bad as George W. Bush, but he was pretty bad. He was pretty incompetent too. Believe me, I met the guy. I know. Ronald Reagan, at a certain point before him, people could invest money. Individual investors could invest money and get a big tax break. So you had all kinds of people investing money into films and into television ideas, etc. And that's exactly what happened with Graffiti Rock, which is the name that I took. And I'll tell you how I got that name. But first, let me tell you how I got the money up. These investors, Steve Mamishin and the brother who I can't remember his name now. Damn. The three of them got together and found investors who were going to get a tax write-off to raise $150,000 to do Graffiti Rock. Now, before we get to that, and they were able to do it to take as a tax write-off. Before we get to that, let's get to the name Graffiti Rock. The name comes from, I thought of the name, I thought this would be a great name for a hip-hop show. But to be honest with you, the name was an event that happened years ago. Marty Cooper, who was a famous female photographer, who was the first photographer of hip hop, and Henry Chalfant, who is the filmmaker of Wild Style, who's one of the first early hip hop documentary makers of specifically of graffiti and the trains, the graffiti and the burners on trains. They put on an event called Graffiti Rock that sort of got aborted because Rocksteady Crew was going to be dancing at it, and the Ballbusters, who was this gang from Brooklyn, who were always showing up and messing stuff up and always frightening people and everything. I never met or saw the Ballbusters, but when you heard about them, you were like, oh no, the Ballbusters are coming. And so they showed up and kind of wrecked the party. I wasn't there. I showed up late, and I showed up, everybody had scattered, and there were shoes all over the street. People were running out of their shoes type situation. And so it never happened. But I guess the name stuck in my head, because years later, I named my show Graffiti Rock without giving credit to them, because I sort of didn't remember where I got the name from. Now I'm giving credit to Marty Cooper and Henry Chalfant, so mad love to them. So anyway, so now I've got the name Graffiti Rock, and I've got people, serious corporate people, saying, hey, man, we're going to make this thing happen. Maybe I should go back to Payne Weber for my new TV show idea. Anyway, we raised the money, like I said, amongst about 15 different people, all putting about $10,000 each in. And I start to write the show, and I know Special K and Kool Moe Dee from the Treacherous Three, and I already know Russell Simmons, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to get like Run-D.M.C on the show. They were just starting to blow up, They might have been they might have been on Soul Train before my show. That was it. Of course, I had the New York City Breakers was my crew, and Vincent Gallo was a friend of mine. I had asked Vince. Now, at this point, Debbie Mazar, Vincent Gallo, all these downtown kids were all big fans of hip-hop uptown. This was before we even had a name for hip-hop. It was just called Uptown Culture. It was called, the jams, throwdowns. And Vince was a really good friend of mine. I asked him to help me with this, to get the kids to be the audience, And I was asking all kinds of kids when I'd go to the Roxy, which is the big hip-hop club. But because nobody knew what I was talking about, they sort of didn't believe me. I knew that a lot of times none of the kids that I wanted to get to be on the show would help me out and be on the show. So I knew that I'd have to get on the air first, and then people would find out about it, and I could get anybody I wanted. And I was actually on the road with the Breakers a lot, so it was difficult. I was doing 3 different things. I was writing my book. on the road with the New York City Breakers and developing the show all at the same time. That was probably a mistake. I probably should have just focused on the show alone, but that's okay. We learned from these episodes.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I wanted to get Bambaataa to be the DJ, and he said, instead of me, have this young guy, DJ Jazzy, I forget his name now. He's on the show. You got to watch the show. You'll see his name. To have him on there, he's part of the Zulu Nation. I'm going to say, okay, bet. He's really good. He's a really good DJ. Not Jazzy J, but another guy. He's a really good DJ. He's good at turntablists. I said, okay, bet. So I have the New York City Breakers. I have him. I've got the crowd. I've got the Treacherous Three as my co-hosts, and I've got myself as the host, and I've got and Shannon was also on it. And so as pre-planning, I'm trying to get all these tracks like by James Brown, whatever. I want the DJ to play James Brown tracks. And of course, the publishing companies that own James Brown's songs, wanted a lot of money, and we needed to cut corners every chance we could. We had to like not pay anybody. People had to do everything for free for the show, especially the artists, especially the talent in front of the camera, in order to make the show affordable. You know, the New York City Breakers did it for free. Cool Mo D and Special K did it for free. Run-D.M.C did it for free. You know, Russell Simmons understood that this was going to promote, you know, the band.
Mm-hmm.
Shannon did it for free. So that was all great. And everybody all the records that we played on the show, they all allowed us to play the records, to promote the records for just $1 as far as their publishing synchronization fees. So it was making the show possible, you know, because we had to spend so much for the space, and for decorating the space, for shooting it, for the cameras, for the promoting it, for the airing it, and all that stuff, and for developing it. So now we get the show in the can, you know. Well, okay, I guess you want me to tell you about the actual shooting of it?
I mean, it doesn't make a difference to me because it's going to be a show that probably won't be more than one episode, I guess.
Well, what's interesting, the director of the show was this guy named Clark, and he actually was the guy who directed the moment he didn't direct the film King of Comedy. That was obviously Martin Scorsese. That's Martin Scorsese's direction, and the starring Robert De Niro.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the one, Robert De Niro and Jerry Lewis, where they kidnapped Jerry Lewis to get on TV.
Mm-hmm.
Robert De Niro and Sandra Bernhard. Well, anyway, the guy, but there was this great scene where Robert De Niro marries a woman who was actually his real wife at the time. God, she's going to kill me. I actually know her really well. She changed her name, but anyway, the sister who actually was married to Robert De Niro for a minute. I'll remember her name. But when they get, and she plays the bartender who he loves in the film, and he takes to Jerry Lewis's house, and they get thrown out.
Mm-hmm.
There's a scene where they get married, and that moment where they are married on this TV show, on Jerry Lewis's TV show, is directed by the guy who directed Graffiti Rock. Of course, I produced it and hosted and created it, but this guy directed it. And so I like that idea. I love the fact that he was involved with Martin Scorsese's show. Anyway, so he's directing it, and I got Brim, the graffiti artist, to do the whole set. He's part of the Zulu Nation. He does the whole set. And funny thing is, he misspelled rapper. He spelled rapper raper. So he's got the word raper on Graffiti Rock.
Oh my God!
And nobody noticed it. Debbie Mazar, who became famous, funny enough, that's wild now. That's a funny connection.
Mm-hmm.
Debbie Mazar, who's one of my friends from downtown Mud Club scene, is one of the dancers on the set. Was actually in a Scorsese film years later, Goodfellas. She plays the girlfriend of Ray Liotta, who later on is like cutting all the cocaine and wants to make love to him, but he doesn't want to, and he runs out. That's Debbie Mazar. She was also the secretary on L.A. Law, and now she's on the Entourage. She plays the agent of the star of Entourage. She plays his press agent, and so it's funny that she was actually on one of the dances of Graffiti Rock. And a funny story about that was that because she's becoming a star, she was on Jimmy Kimmel Live last year, and while she's on Jimmy Kimmel Live, this happens oftentimes. You're on a show years ago that you kind of maybe made a fool of yourself or something. They had the tape of Graffiti Rock, and apparently a lot of the writers on Jimmy Kimmel Live knew about Graffiti Rock and loved Graffiti Rock and would play it all the time. And when she came on Jimmy Kimmel Live, they thought they would ambush her by saying, you were on a show, you were dancing on the show, and right away she knew what they were going to do. They were going to sort of embarrass her because there she was, and she was kind of, not the best dancer, but she was really sweet and cute on it. Well, instead of her being embarrassed and saying, oh, I can't believe you're showing that, you've seen that on TV shows, right?
Right.
People say, we found this footage of you in a commercial. We found this footage of da-da-da-da. And they're like, oh, no, don't show it. Well, Debbie Mazar was so dope. First of all, she says, yeah, are you talking about Graffiti Rock? Yeah, Graffiti Rock was a brilliant show. Vincent Gallo was on it. Michael Holman created the show. Michael Holman was a genius. I can't believe she said that about me. I almost died when I heard that. I was so proud, and I was so grateful to Debbie for saying that. And instead of her being embarrassed by being on the show, and instead of her being like caught out there the way Jimmy Kimmel wanted it to go, she said, yeah, man, we were all into hip-hop back in the day, and back then everybody downtown was into hip-hop, and we were proud of it, and I'm proud of being on that show. She made it very clear that she was proud of being on that show, and I was like, right on, Debbie. Well, anyway, the funny thing is I went after Jimmy Kimmel Live for using that footage without my permission, and they were like, well, we can use it because it's like, I said, no, you're going to pay me for using that footage. I made them pay me for using it anyway, even though she did great things. And I always wanted to thank her, and I've been trying to reach out to her to thank her. So if she hears this, Debbie, thank you so much for saying those nice things about me. So anyway, that was a moment when Graffiti Rock was on the air not too long ago. Who else was on it? Vincent Gallo, myself. The wife of Ken Swift was the girl who says, oh, I'm wearing my Adidas with fat laces when I was on the spot, in the moment when I'm talking to the kids on the spot. Ken Swift's wife. Who else? So anyway, we're filming the show, and God, I remember the SAG union and AFTRA, the unions that represent actors and dancers and stuff. They were representing the New York City Breakers, and they were like, I remember them making the New York City Breakers say, no, we're not going to dance on the show. And I was like, what? I almost blew my top, and I was screaming at them. I said, you better do this show. And I found the AFTRA SAG representative, and I said, how dare you sabotage my show, because it's a union that I said, why don't you let me get on the air first before you sabotage my show? Are you kidding me? Give me a break. And so they relented and let them be on the show without being paid, because they were in AFTRA. I said, this is my crew. I created the New York City Breakers. I made them stars. I need them to do this one thing for me. You can't, get in the way of this. And they eventually relented. But I had to, fight tooth and nail every minute, every day to make this thing happen. And, the funny thing is sometimes I look at the show and I look at myself in the opening beaming in. I don't know what was going on in my mind for doing that. I don't know what I was thinking. Sometimes I look back at that and I cringe and I'm embarrassed. But the funny thing is, speaking of Star Trek and me beaming in, a couple of things I want to say. First of all, I remember seeing the first Star Trek. I didn't see it the first time it aired, but I saw it years later, and someone said, this is the first episode. And what was funny about it was that Mr. Spock, who was supposed to be all cool and like this alien and never got excited, ever. He might have got excited 3 or 4 times in the whole history of the show. In the very first episode, they hadn't really figured that out in the series. They hadn't really given him that character.
Mm-hmm.
But he's really all like, to battleship stations, and he's all like really weird and excited all the time through the whole episode. I'm like cracking up because here's this guy. They obviously said maybe we shouldn't have him all excited. Let's have him like more cool. Let's have him like this cool alien. And they changed his character after an episode or two. And the point I'm making here is that it takes a number of episodes to really figure out the show. Like Seinfeld's first shows really weren't all that funny. It takes time. You have to give the thing a chance. Well, Graffiti Rock really didn't get a chance. The history of Graffiti Rock was this. It aired. It did very, very well. It got incredible Nelson rating. As you can imagine, a show like Graffiti Rock coming on the air as early as 1984 when there was nothing on the air that captured all the elements of hip-hop, that was all about hip-hop. There was nothing on the air. So, of course, it did well. It aired in 88 syndicated markets from Los Angeles to Seattle to New York and everywhere, and Miami and Puerto Rico and everywhere in between. 88 markets around the country. It did amazing Nelson ratings. It was like at the top brackets of Nelson ratings. So that was just the pilot now. That was just the pilot. So that gave myself and the investors, Diane Abbott, by the way, is the name of the actress who was married to Robert De Niro. Diane Abbott. Thank you, Diane. Mad love to you. And we're still good friends. And she was the one who was in King of Comedy. So anyway, we make the TV show, and because it did great Nielsen ratings, which is Nielsen ratings, I don't think people talk about Nielsen ratings that much anymore, but Nielsen ratings is the way that they determine whether a show does really well or not. They have the Nielsen families out there, people who are asked to judge a TV show, and they're kind of like a random sample. So we did really great ratings, and so we had a lot of confidence in going to NAPD at the end of the year. NAPD is an acronym for the National Association of Producers of Television Entertainment, NAPTE. Mm-hmm. What NAPD does is has a convention every year, and they still have them every year, in Las Vegas. And at Las Vegas, you go, like you might be a station manager, and you go to travel to Las Vegas, and you do all the fun things that people do, executives and conventions. You gamble, and you try to find a date, and you do this, do that. But the main purpose that you're there for is to buy television programming to air on your station in your local area. That's how it works. And so we were really confident. We went there, we bought a booth, and we had Graffiti Rock airing, and we had all kinds of graphics and characters and the whole bit. And, like you would do at any convention where you have a booth. Everyone knows what that's like. You can go to a booth, and it could be a computer convention, it could be a gaming convention, it could be a fashion convention, and people show up and buy booths and try to sell their wares. So we were trying to sell Graffiti Rock, and we were having a dickens of a time trying to sell the show. Why? Because all the station managers out there, to a man, said the same thing. They all said, well, this rap and hip-hop thing is just a passing fad. It's not going to last. Can you imagine?
Wow.
They were saying rap music is a passing fad. It's not going to last. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. This is going to be bigger than ever. This is the beginning. It's going to be huge. And like, no. Finally, so the first year was a complete failure. The second year, we had the same reaction, except Channel 4 in L.A. said, well, we'll tell you what. Channel 4 in L.A. is a big syndicated network. We'll buy the show if New York buys the show and Chicago buys the show. So we're like, okay, great. We got one commitment there. Because if L.A., Chicago, and New York buy the show, then everyone's going to buy the show. Mm-hmm. Of course, a lot of networks in the South weren't even interested because there was too many mixed race. There were too much race mixing on the show. There were white kids, black kids, Asian kids, Hispanic kids. There's a lot of mixed race kids. So so they didn't want to know about it. But that was the beginning. I'll tell you, hip hop in a lot of ways was the beginning of a lot of breakdown of racial barriers in the South, much more than the '60s. Hip hop, New York City breakers. I remember getting letters from kids in the South saying the Ku Klux Klan is mad at us, and a lot of these white racists are mad at us because we have a two-tone breakdance crew, but that's what we want to do, and we want to be like the New York City breakers. And we get fan mail all the time from the South saying the exact same thing, but we're making everybody like rethink racial relationships. It was the hip-hop scene in the 80s, not the 60s, that broke down racial barriers in the South more than any other subcultural movement, which is an aside. But I just wanted to mention that. So anyway, back to graffiti rock. So now we approach Chicago, and Chicago's like, yeah, we'll go on the air if L.A. goes on the air and New York goes on the air. So we're like, okay, now we just had to break down New York. New York, of course, we're going to get New York. So then we approach the same channel that we aired it on. I'm not going to mention it right now. And we aired the pilot on originally. We said, okay, if Chicago will go on the air if you go on the air, and L.A. will go on the air if you go on the air, so would you please agree to going on the air? Well, at that time, that particular station, major syndicated station, had a lot of control was exerted upon it by organized crime. And these organized crime figures, I won't say what kind or who they were because I don't really know, because I didn't talk to them directly. My investors did. The people at Payne Weber did. Said, we'll let you on the air, but you got to pay us X amount of thousands of dollars under the table. And I was like, bet, let's do it. I mean, we'll if that's what it takes, let's get on the air. I'm sure that a lot of these other shows are on the air in the same way. Right. I mean, if that's like the cost of doing business in New York City, which we know has a lot of organized crime involvement, then that's what it takes. I mean, we've got to do this. If that's the only way we get on the air, we have to do it. Right. Well, cooler heads prevailed. These investors wanted nothing to do with it. I was like much younger than them and much more ambitious and much more wanted to see the show get on the air. And I just thought, well, that's what it's going to take, And they were like, we don't want to have anything to do with organized crime. We don't want to be in bed with them. You don't know where that could take us. You don't know how ugly that could get for us, how dangerous that could be. And so they said, no way. And I didn't have the control the legal control to sidestep them. And so after 2 years of trying to sell the show, and after 2 years of station managers who either believed that graffiti rock and hip hop and rapping was never going to make it, was always going to be a fad, or some of them.
This is We All Be. Hello, everybody. This is Ron Hurd, R2C2H2, the artivist on We All Be Radio. We was having some technical difficulties. I guess the powers that be don't want to hear the message that's being put out there, but we're going to get Brother Michael Holman back on the phone shortly. But I guess we'll play an interlude as we get Brother Michael Holman back on. And just sit tight, hold on, and we're coming back on. Just take it easy, and we'll have Brother Michael Holman back on very soon. All right, we're back on the air with Brother Michael Holman. I'm sorry for that intrusion. I guess organized crime or somebody trying to stop us from being on the air, but we back on the air.
Snap. That was funny that it happened.
We got a caller. We got a caller.
Oh, cool. I'm open.
Okay.
Your Senator Bello.
Area code 213? Area code 213?
Yes.
Yes, how you doing today, sir? Welcome to We All Be Radio.
I'm doing good. Just happened to listen to your show, and I had a big event here. We're at the Westmoreland Loft in Los Angeles, and I'm artist and backer of hip-hop, and we had an event called the hip-hop event to show the community that hip-hop wasn't all bad, and we brought in a lot of interesting community representatives, and it was quite successful.
Well, congratulations. I think you were on, there was a mention about your show, your event on Tools of War.
Oh, really?
Tools of War is this great blog or website that comes out of New York City. Christine, who is married to Fable, wife of Fable from Rocksteady Crew, has her own website in which she promotes hip-hop events. I'm pretty sure your event was on that.
Yeah, I guess it was through in Hollywood. They have a hip-hop cafe. And where are you guys out of?
Well, I'm calling from New York City, and the show is stationed in Memphis.
I see. Well, it's a small world. We're doing an art show, the Noma Robinson Smith Hour for the Arts and Senior Issues. So, but we have lofts in California, and I put some creative people together, and that was one of the events that we brought people to the lofts to see the different kinds of arts, and it certainly...
Wait, excuse me a second. What does this have to do with Graffiti Rock?
Well, Graffiti Rock, that was part of our whole theme. And graffiti itself, the art of graffiti, we're recognizing, and I don't know
wait a second.
Graffiti art. Rock.
Wait a second. I'm talking about the TV show Graffiti Rock.
I have no idea about it.
Okay, well, that's what this show's about, so thank you. Can we go to the next caller?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, thank you for calling in, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a bit of a jive. Anyway, a self-promotion moment there. If you're going to call in, please make it about at least what we're talking about.
I'm actually just about Graffiti Rock. I think it's that's why I'm glad that we're having this show about Graffiti Rock as well, because people didn't know the history of where all these things came from. Like you talking about the Godfather and the Father or whatever. How does it feel now, even though you had to go through all those struggles over those 2 years, to be on the right side of history? Is it bittersweet for you? Because, I mean, you could have cashed in more.
Yeah, it's a little bittersweet. To be honest with you, I'll tell you some of my ambitions at the time, things that I was thinking, which was hyper ambitious, probably would have got me into trouble with the FCC.
Mm-hmm.
I really thought, wow, I'm going to have this TV show. I'm going to have rappers. I'm going to have all kinds of graph artists and turntablists, b-boys, etc. And I saw myself developing Graffiti Rock record label, like bringing unknown artists on the air, playing them, then signing them and promoting them. Probably would have been against. What do you call that? Trade and like would have been a form of monopoly or whatever.
Yeah, fair trade or something.
Fair trade or whatever. But I was planning on having an empire from Graffiti Rock, and then when it didn't happen, I was like really disappointed. You know what happened afterwards is I decided I'd go back to film school, or I'd go to film school, and then soon after that made Dougie Fresh's music video and started making a lot of music videos, and I was glad I did that. But I had all these plans of building an empire off of Graffiti Rock. It would have been Russell Simmons' Watch Out, but it didn't really happen. One thing that was interesting that I find looking back on Graffiti Rock, in defense of Graffiti Rock, was that a lot of times people will say, oh man, it was kind of like, it wasn't that hard, or how come it was, you didn't have any gangster rappers on there, and like the rappers looked strange, or the fashion was funny, or everything was kind of polite and soft. Well, one thing I want to say is that, first of all, in order for us to get on the air, number one, we had to have we had to bend over backwards. We couldn't have had a hardcore Roxy or Brooklyn crowd or whatever. We had to have a mixed crowd. We had to do all these things in order to make the show palatable for the station managers who were going to air it. So I'm not saying that hip-hop crowds weren't mixed race. They certainly were. But for the most part, they were black and Puerto Rican.
Right.
But we had to mix it up even more in order to make it even at all possible to get on the air, You know, we didn't have the muscle and power and history of a Soul Train. You know, so we had to come off right away being all inclusive. That was number one in the crowd. Number two, hip hop and rap hadn't gotten to the stage of gangster rap yet. You know, so like it didn't even exist yet. So rapping was, in general, you look at some of the videos from back in those days, you know, a lot of it was funny and cute, and you had rappers like you know, you had rappers and raps like who am I thinking of? You know, who's now down in the D.C. area, who's the clown prince of rap, Big Brother, who's on the weight loss show. Who are we thinking of? Who did You Got What I Need? Will you say?
I know Biz Markie. Biz
Markie. I mean, you know, rap was kind of like, you had the Fat Boys. You had all kinds of acts that were like, you know, they weren't soft or anything, but they just weren't like so scary and dangerous and hard and all rapping about misogyny and violence and guns and rap was different then.
Right.
And so we couldn't afford it to and even if it was, you know, we had to make it somewhat more of a lighter show than what a lot of the shows that I had done on cable years before were really like. And I wanted, and you know, in all honesty, I'm not gonna apologize for this. In all honesty, I really wanted graffiti rock to have an element of accessibility to young kids, to elementary school kids. I wanted to educate them to what hip hop was. That's why I had the definitions on there, different rap words and stuff. I wanted it to be non-threatening because I'll tell you, I wanted the world to be turned on to hip-hop. And you know something? It worked. Graffiti rock was a major part. It wasn't the only one. It wasn't the majority. But it was a major factor in turning on the rest of the country and the rest of the world to hip-hop. I know that for a fact. I know for a fact that every rapper out there, I don't care if they're gangster rappers or whatever the hell they were, every rapper out there who's old school, when they were younger, before they ever made it, before they were serious OGs, they were young kids watching graffiti rock, and they were influenced by graffiti rock. That means a lot. And I know, and I'm proud of the fact that graffiti rock is part of hip-hop history. Yes, every once in a while I get people say, oh, man, how come it wasn't more hard? How come it wasn't more, you know, gangster, da-da-da? Well, that's not where hip-hop was. That's how advanced, that's how ahead of its time graffiti rock was. Gangster rap hadn't even existed at that point. Hadn't even existed outside of New York. So that's how ahead of my time I was.
Man,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was thinking about what you were saying, like the price you pay for being a pioneer sometimes you don't get the proper recognition or due. And also I'd like to know, how can we get a copy of the Graffiti Rock show?
Well, you can actually go on to my, thank you for that plug there. You can actually go on to my website, www.michaelholman.com, and go to the tab that says Graffiti Rock. You got to finesse it a little bit. Some people have told me that if you go to the tab, it doesn't work. Well, if you put the cursor just to the top edge of the tab, click it, just finesse with it a little bit, you'll be able to open it. Trust me. And you open up Graffiti Rock, and at the bottom of that page, there's a way to connect to the distributors of Graffiti Rock, who, by the way, you can also Google them. MVD. That's probably www.mvd for musicvideodistributors.com, and they're my sole distributors of Graffiti Rock, and they will sell it to you. You know, they'll mail it to you, send it out there to you. Use your credit card or PayPal, whatever. I don't know. I'm a dinosaur. I don't know about this.
I mean, I think you're a dinosaur. You like one of them dinosaurs that people thought were extinct but still living. You know what I'm saying? Like one of the discoveries you hear about every week on the internet on Discovery Channel.
Oh yeah, but I'm the dinosaur that's still making new things happen.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I was saying. Like, you still around doing it. And also, what can people do if they want to bring you out to speak about Graffiti Rock and about your amazing career and life story?
Say that, because as a matter of fact, I've done that in the past quite a bit. I've done a lot of lectures. Texas, when Basquiat, the film Basquiat came out, I went down there to help promote the film and did a lecture at the University of Texas in Austin and in Houston. I've lectured at different universities all over the country. But as far as, and now this Art Institute is now bringing me down to Washington D.C. area to do a lecture down there. And what we're talking about is me coming down there talking about hip-hop, the beginnings of hip-hop, the beginnings of the downtown art scene, how they worked together, how they influenced each other and supported each other, and where they are now. But there are many subjects I speak on. I have this spoken word piece that I do called Confessions of a Subculturalist, in which I talk about my many episodes and stories and dramas and whatnot that I've witnessed, that I've participated in, that I created in the hip-hop world, in the downtown art world, etc. And we're planning on getting out there to the other art institutes around the country. But any organization out there that has a few bucks, that wants to fly me out and put me up and has the capacity to put me in front of an audience, I bring with me footage from different films I've been involved with, of different TV shows like Graffiti Rock, like my other cable shows, music, slides, images, and my own mouth, my own story, my own stories that I bring on stage, that I can tell an audience of students, that I can tell an audience of interested people at a community center or at a YMCA or whatever it is. Whatever organization that you have out there that has the capacity to put together a lecture show in which I can show up and not only tell stories and read from my book, but I can also show films. I can also show bits and bobs of, moments of films, and moments of TV shows that I was directly involved in that help tell the story of culture, hip-hop, but also can tell the story of the downtown art scene that I was also heavily involved in. Jean-Michel Basquiat, Keith Haring, Futura, Fab Five Freddy, all these figures. We were all part of a major movement that brought so much to the world in the early 80s. And I'm an expert in this. I'm not only an historian, but I was there making these things happen. And I would be very, very happy to come to your community center, to come to your community, to come to your city, to come to your school, to come to your university, high school, what have you, and talk to your students and talk to your audience about these very important things. And let me just say this one thing. The tradition of the griot, the tradition of the spoken word artist, the tradition of oral history, not just written history, not just documentary, but someone coming and speaking to you and your audience live, and that would be me, and sharing with you this history is like nothing else. Nothing else can do and inspire the way a live person coming and speaking to you can. Nothing else can. Yes, film is inspiring. Yes, music is inspiring. Yes, shows and documentaries are inspiring. But the most inspiring thing in terms of inspiring new young artists, inspiring new young people to think for themselves, be their own, not be computer and couch potatoes.
Right.
Make things happen. The most inspiring thing that you could ever do for students, for an audience, is to have someone like me, frankly, show up and sit and talk, or stand and talk in front of an audience and share my stories with you, tell you how we made our scene happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best way, the oral tradition.
And on that note, we thank you so much, Brother Michael Holman, for sharing a part of your oral history as well as like important part of American history, pop culture history, with us today on We All Be Radio. And we are looking forward to many more lectures and also installments of Holman Unleashed.
I will be back, and I have many, many stories to share with you that will turn you on and empower you to make your dreams come true.
Thank you, Brother Michael Holman. And that does it for this edition of We All Be Radio. The Artivist presents Holman Unleashed.